She shrieked, then slammed my phone against the wall while I was talking to my sister. Sometimes in life, we think we have everything within our grasp: a stable job, a loving wife, a peaceful home, but then, just one wrong decision, one misguided step, can plunge us into a vortex of secrets and lies, costing us everything we hold dearest. And this is the story of a dazzling illusion that nearly destroyed my life, making me lose everything but also helping me find myself again. Hello there, I hope all is well with you. Today, I want to tell you a story about love, control, and the price you pay when you try to love someone who can't love you back in a normal way, someone carrying an unceasing emotional storm that engulfed my happiness. I'm Nathan, a high school teacher in Sacramento. My life before I met Claire was quite simple and, in some ways, a bit predictable, even dull in many people's eyes. I loved teaching, loved the passionate teenagers I worked with, and found joy in the ordinary. I never imagined my life would be turned upside down by such an intense love. Then Claire appeared. I met her by chance at a local art exhibition, where I went to support a former student. She stood out in the crowd of art lovers, with her flowing golden hair cascading down her back, captivating ocean blue eyes, and a radiant smile like morning sunshine. Claire worked as an interior designer, had a liberal, free-spirited style, and a strong personality. From the first glance, I was drawn to her deadly charm, the confidence she exuded, and her mesmerizing sense of humor. She made me laugh heartily, made me feel light and more special than ever before. Claire had a unique way of making me feel special, different from any other man she had ever met. Every look she gave me, every word she uttered, every small gesture of care made me feel like I was the center of her universe, the only one she wanted to pay attention to, the only one she wanted to spend time with. She praised my ideas, encouraged me to pursue hobbies I had long neglected. I had never experienced feeling so idolized. It was an addictive drug, a euphoric feeling I never knew I craved so much. I, a humble high school teacher, suddenly felt like a superhero, an extraordinary man in Claire's eyes. We fell in love fiercely, passionately, as if there were no tomorrow. Our dates were always filled with hearty laughter, endless conversations about everything under the sun. From philosophy to the most trivial plans for the future, she could talk for hours without getting bored, and I would listen intently, feeling like I was discovering a whole new world, full of colors and surprises. Claire was the type of woman who made you feel like you were living in a Hollywood romantic movie. Everything was perfect, exhilarating, dramatic, and full of emotion. Our love seemed destined, something I had been searching for all along. I believed I had found my perfect other half, someone who would bring the most vibrant colors to my life, dispelling the dullness that had existed for so long. But that was when the cameras were still rolling, when the romantic film was still being shot with the most beautiful scenes. Little did I know that when the cameras turned off, when the stage lights faded, and the raw truth of life began to speak, our story would turn into a completely different genre, a dark and mysterious psychological thriller, where I was no longer the protagonist but became a puppet in Claire's drama. That was the secret I only realized when it was too late, when I was completely caught in the whirlwind of love and manipulation, losing my way and myself. Just a few months after we decided to move in together, strange signs began to appear, dripping like the first raindrops foreshadowing an approaching storm, subtly and difficult to recognize. Claire could be as sweet as an angel, gentle, thoughtful, and full of love, giving me the most tender gestures, then suddenly become icy cold, distant, and malicious after a single slip of my tongue, an action I didn't do to her liking, or even an unintentional glance. Her emotional shifts were terrifyingly rapid, sometimes in an instant, leaving me no time to react, no time to understand what was happening, like an on-off switch constantly flipping without rhyme or reason. I still vividly remember the first time I distinctly felt that abnormality. It was a fateful Friday afternoon, a promising end to the work week. I promised to come home early to cook a romantic dinner with Claire, a special meal we had planned since the beginning of the week. But then, an emergency meeting at school suddenly arose, lasting longer than expected. I called her to let her know, explaining that I would be home about 15 minutes late due to rush hour traffic and the prolonged meeting. I thought she would understand. When I arrived home, the apartment was dark, eerily silent. Not a single light, not a sound. I found Claire curled up on the sofa, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say anything, just looked at me with eyes full of hurt, a cold, resentful gaze, as if I had just betrayed her in the cruelest way, even though I was only 15 minutes late. Then suddenly, She burst into heart-wrenching sobs, her choked gasps tearing through the quiet of the room. You promised. You promised you'd be home early. Do you know how worried I was about you when you weren't here on time? Do you know how carefully I prepared everything for this dinner? She screamed, her voice full of pain and despair, blaming me for not caring, not loving, not valuing her promise. I tried to explain, tried to soothe her, holding her close, but she pushed me away roughly. She wouldn't listen, wouldn't accept any explanation. After that, she was completely silent, not saying a word for 2 whole days, not looking at me, not reacting to anything I said. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, just sat staring out the window with a blank, distant look. The house seemed enveloped by a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, to the point where I could barely breathe. I felt utterly guilty, feeling like I was the cause of all this suffering, even though I didn't intend to. I endured 2 terrifying days, living in extreme tension and fear, not knowing what to do to appease her. I tried cooking her favorite dishes, bringing them to her, but she just shook her head. I bought flowers, wrote apology letters, but to no avail. I was completely broken and felt helpless. But then, after those 2 frightening days of silence, when I had almost given up hope, Claire unexpectedly hugged me from behind as I stood in the kitchen making coffee. She held me tight, burying her head in my shoulder, and her voice trembled, full of remorse and vulnerability, like a lost child. I'm sorry, Nathan. I'm so sorry for making you sad. I know I was wrong. I was just afraid you'd leave me, like everyone else has left me before. I can't bear to lose you. You're everything to me. Those words, though full of manipulation and seemingly a psychological strategy, struck a chord with my compassion and forgiveness. I immediately forgot what she had done, the pain she had caused. I thought, she's just a woman deeply hurt by her past, someone fighting invisible fears. She needs my love, my patience, and my boundless understanding to heal her emotional wounds, to overcome her abandonment issues. I just needed to be there for her, to prove to her that I would never abandon her, would never leave her. I thought I was strong enough to do that, loving enough to accept all her flaws. I deluded myself into thinking I was a knight, rushing to rescue a distressed princess, the only one who could pull her out of the darkness, without realizing that the princess herself was imprisoning me with her love and false vulnerability. That was the first and most dangerous secret I overlooked. An unhealthy love was slowly consuming my life, little by little, silently and imperceptibly. After that incident, Claire's controlling behaviors became increasingly evident and terrifying. She began to control everything in my life, subtly and gradually, like an invisible rope tightening around me, making it impossible for me to breathe. She would suggest what clothes I wore, wanting me to choose outfits she liked, even buying me an entirely new wardrobe. If I planned to meet friends, she would act sad, or say she suddenly felt unwell, a headache or fatigue, forcing me to cancel my plans to stay home with her, to care for her. I couldn't play golf with my best friend, couldn't attend colleagues' parties, couldn't visit my parents as often as before. Every relationship in my life had to revolve around Claire, and if not, she would find a way to make me feel guilty. In particular, my phone became evidence in this relationship, a symbol of her control. She constantly checked my phone. If I placed my phone face down on the table, she would frown, her eyes full of suspicion, probing, "What are you hiding in there? Who are you talking to that you don't want me to know about?" I would have to pick up my phone, unlock it, for her to inspect every message, every incoming and outgoing call, every social media app. I started living in constant fear, afraid that even a harmless message could ignite an emotional storm. If I talked to a female colleague at school, even if it was purely about work, or if she saw me scrolling Facebook and a friend of the opposite sex commented on my post, she would immediately burst into tears when I got home, or fly into an uncontrollable rage. "Are you cheating on me? Do you have someone else? Don't you love me anymore?" Those accusations were sharp as knives, piercing my heart, making me feel terrible, so guilty, even though I had done nothing wrong. I even had to automatically delete chat history with female colleagues, trying to hide everything to avoid triggering her unpredictable outbursts. Once, I was sitting on the sofa, smiling to myself reading a message from my sister, asking about our family's weekend plans. It was a completely harmless message, but Claire suddenly snatched the phone from my hand. Her eyes suddenly became wild, filled with uncontrollable jealousy and rage, her face contorted, no longer its usual beauty. "Are you cheating on me? Who's texting you that you're smiling like that? It must be some little girl from school." she shrieked, her voice shrill, then unexpectedly slammed the phone against the wall. The shattering sound of the screen was like a thunderclap in my ears, a piercing noise cutting through the quiet of the room. I was stunned, unable to believe what I was witnessing. My beloved phone, shattered, lay scattered on the floor like a fragment of my life. I was furious, wanting to scream at her, wanting to leave immediately, but her desperate eyes, the rolling tears, held me back. She collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, begging me not to leave her. And even more terrifying was what happened the next morning. When I woke up, she had prepared the most lavish breakfast I had ever seen, a table laden with all my favorite dishes: scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, fragrant toast, and hot coffee. She sat opposite me with a remorseful expression, tear-filled eyes, and her voice was gentle, trembling, full of regret and vulnerability, as if last night had never happened. "I'm sorry, Nathan. I'm truly sorry for breaking your phone. I couldn't control myself. I was just afraid of losing you. Please don't leave me. Okay, I can't live without you. You're everything to me." She held my hand tightly, her eyes pleading and desperate, promising she would never do it again. I found myself trapped in an inescapable cycle of control, irrational anger, dramatic emotional scenes, and then sweet apologies, loving pleas, and false promises. Every time I wanted to pull away, to find a way out of this toxic relationship, she would collapse, completely broken, threatening to harm herself, and I would revert to the role of savior, protector, the only one who could lift her up. I couldn't abandon her, because I believed she truly loved me and was just fighting deep internal wounds. I thought I would be the only one who could endure and help her overcome it. I believed my love could work miracles, but I was wrong. I was not the savior, but a prisoner in my own relationship. I gradually lost my freedom, my social connections, my personal hobbies, and most importantly, I lost myself. I didn't dare talk to anyone about it, feeling ashamed and afraid of being judged, afraid people would think I was weak. I became a shadow of myself, living in constant fear, afraid Claire would get angry, afraid she would do something foolish, afraid of upsetting her. I lived with a terrible secret, the secret of a love that was slowly killing me, a love I couldn't leave and couldn't continue. Like a fish caught in a net, my life became a long string of anxiety, exhaustion, and despair. I no longer recognized myself in the mirror. I used to be an optimistic, cheerful man. Now, all that remained was a gloomy, haggard face. I constantly suffered from headaches, and my stomach churned with stress. I had almost severed all external relationships, only keeping in touch with a few close colleagues at school who had begun to notice my obvious change. Every day, I felt heavier. My smile had vanished, replaced by a sullen, constantly strained expression. I started suffering from chronic insomnia, lost a significant amount of weight, and my work performance also declined significantly. I was frequently distracted during class, my mind swirling with thoughts of Claire, what she was doing at home, whether she was okay. I felt like I was dying from the inside, a slow, painful death that no one knew about. I wished I could share this burden with someone, but shame and fear held me back. I started making basic mistakes, forgetting meeting schedules, confusing students' homework assignments. The enthusiasm I once had was now replaced by indifference and fatigue. I remember once, I was assigned to supervise a major project for 11th grade students. It was an important project, affecting their academic results, but I forgot the deadline for submitting the progress report, causing my entire student group to be affected. The principal, a person who always trusted and highly valued me, had to call me into her office. Her eyes were full of disappointment and concern as she said, "Nathan, I don't understand what's happening to you. You're a good teacher, but lately you've been very distracted. I've noticed you're frequently absent from teacher meetings. Reports are always late. If this continues, I'm afraid we'll have to reevaluate your role." That reprimand was like a splash of cold water in my face, but I was too tired and desperate to resist. I just bowed my head, apologized, and promised to improve, even though deep down I knew I was sinking so deep I couldn't pull myself up. My relationship with colleagues also visibly deteriorated. I declined every invitation to lunch, to coffee after work. I avoided personal conversations, afraid I would inadvertently reveal the truth about my life. My gloom and silence gradually alienated people. They looked at me with pity, or sometimes confusion. I felt isolated, like an island in the ocean, no one able to reach or understand my hidden pain. One afternoon, after school, I confided in a longtime close friend. Also a trusted colleague at school, named Tom. He was a quiet but very understanding and perceptive person. After listening to me recount Claire's erratic behavior, her unprovoked rages, the suffocating control, and the tearful apologies after each outburst, Tom looked at me with eyes full of concern and empathy. He didn't judge, just listened carefully. "Nathan," he said, his voice grave, full of seriousness, "have you ever heard of borderline personality disorder, BPD?" I had never heard that name. Immediately, I went home and started searching for information about BPD online. I read about it, line by line, word by word, every symptom, every specific example, and felt a jolt run down my spine. I saw myself in every description: sudden and extreme mood swings, intense fear of abandonment leading to desperate behaviors to keep others close, impulsive and self-destructive acts, uncontrollable rages, and then overwhelming feelings of emptiness and regret. I saw Claire in every illustrative example. I saw myself, someone being manipulated and trapped, in every story of BPD patients' loved ones. It was a huge shock, a deeply painful truth, yet it was a liberation from the blindness that had plagued me for the past 2 years. I had no idea that I had been living in a play where Claire was the director and I was the main actor, pulled by strings without even knowing it. Thinking I was playing a role of love, I decided to see a therapist. I wanted to find a way to get treatment, not for Claire, but for myself. I found a well-known therapist in the city, someone with extensive experience helping people in relationships with BPD patients. In the first session, I told her everything, from the early days of passionate love to the painful emotional dramas, the sleepless nights spent worrying. I talked about the inner conflict, the fear, the guilt, and the helplessness. By the third therapy session, as I was recounting how Claire had smashed my phone in a fit of jealous rage and then sweetly made breakfast the next morning as if nothing had happened, the therapist looked me straight in the eyes, her gaze full of understanding and resolve. She said a sentence that completely changed my perception and my life. "You're not wrong for loving. Nathan, your love is real, and you loved with all your heart. You did everything you could, but you were wrong to think you could save someone who isn't ready to be saved. You cannot heal her, and more importantly, you cannot sacrifice yourself for such an unhealthy relationship. It's destroying you. You deserve a peaceful life." Those words were like a thunderclap in my ears, waking me from my illusory dream and self-deception. I broke down. I cried. I sobbed like a child, not for Claire, but for myself, for what I had endured, because I realized I hadn't been true to myself for the past 2 years. I had deceived myself into thinking that everything would get better, that my love was big enough to change her, patient enough to wait for her to get well. I had lost my identity, my joy, and my peace. I had given too much, to the point where I had nothing left for myself, only an empty, tired Nathan. That was my biggest secret. I had imprisoned myself in a toxic relationship for an illusion of love and sacrifice. Subsequent therapy sessions helped me understand BPD better, how the disorder works, and most importantly, the difference between love and codependency, between empathy and blind sacrifice. I learned to set boundaries, how to protect myself from emotional manipulation, and most importantly, how to love myself before loving others. The therapist helped me reevaluate the entire relationship, analyzing Claire's every behavior and my reactions, thereby helping me escape the cycle of manipulation. I started practicing meditation and yoga to reduce stress. I reconnected with old friends I had alienated. I made time for hobbies that Claire had once discouraged: reading, playing guitar. I felt like I was slowly being reborn, little by little. When I started to change, when I gradually found my own space again, Claire immediately sensed it. Her control became even more intense, like a cornered animal. She felt threatened by my newfound independence, by the fact that I was no longer completely dependent on her emotions. She constantly questioned me about my appointments with Tom, about spending time meditating instead of being with her. "Do you have someone else? What are you hiding? Don't you love me anymore? I feel like you're leaving me." Her eyes held extreme fear, mixed with anger and despair. One evening, after I had just returned from a therapy session, I tried to explain to Claire that I was learning to take care of myself, that it would help me become a better version of myself for our relationship. I even gently suggested she also seek professional help, but Claire wouldn't accept it. She started screaming, sharp words like daggers plunging into my heart. "Do you think I'm crazy? Do you want to leave me for other girls? Are you blaming me for everything?" I tried to stay calm, applying what I had learned from the therapist. I told her in the calmest voice I could, Claire, I'm not blaming you. I just want both of us to be happy and healthy. I think we need some space to rethink things. As soon as the words space and rethink left my mouth, Claire reacted like a wounded animal. Her eyes widened, her face expressing extreme panic. She suddenly ran into the kitchen. I hadn't even had time to understand what was happening. A crazy act occurred immediately after. Claire grabbed a small knife from the drawer, and in a terrifying moment, I saw her bring the knife to her wrist. "You want to leave, don't you? You want to abandon me, don't you? Then go ahead. I can't live without you. I'll die for you to see," she screamed in despair, and a stream of fresh red blood began to seep from the cut on her wrist. My heart seemed to stop. My whole body trembled. That image will haunt me forever. Instinctively, I lunged, snatching the knife from her hand. I held her tight, trying to calm her down. All reason seemed to vanish. I thought I was going to fall back into the same old emotional trap, become the savior again. I took Claire to the hospital immediately after that crazy act. On the way, she wouldn't stop crying, pleading, then switching to anger, blaming me for all her suffering. I held her tight, my hand pressing on the bleeding wound on her wrist, trying to remain as calm as possible. When we arrived at the hospital, the nurses quickly administered first aid and took Claire to the emergency room for examination. I sat in the cold hallway, staring blankly into space, feeling physically and mentally exhausted. I tried to call Claire's mother, Ms. Elizabeth. She lived in another state. We only visited her occasionally on holidays. My voice trembled as I briefly explained Claire's urgent situation. Ms. Elizabeth immediately panicked and said she would fly out the next morning. When Ms. Elizabeth arrived at the hospital, she looked much thinner than the last time I saw her. Her eyes were full of worry, but also a deep weariness, as if she was used to situations like this. I told her everything, from the unprovoked rages, the control, to Claire's self-harming act the night before. Ms. Elizabeth listened to me silently, her eyes brimming with tears. Then she sighed, a heavy sigh laden with years of burden. She looked at me, her gaze full of sympathy, and began to tell a story I had never heard about Claire, a shocking secret about her past that Claire had meticulously hidden throughout our time together. Claire, she had a very difficult childhood. Nathan, Ms. Elizabeth began, her voice choked with emotion. Her father, he was a very authoritarian and abusive man. He frequently yelled at and beat Claire and me when she was little. Those beatings, those endless insults left deep scars in Claire's soul. She always lived in constant fear, afraid of being abandoned, afraid of not being loved. She learned to manipulate those around her to keep them, to feel safe, because that was the only way she knew to cope with her chaotic world. She continued, when Claire was 15, she was betrayed and abandoned by her best friend. She attempted suicide for the first time then. We had to take her for a lot of psychological treatment, but then she would run away, unwilling to face her wounds. She refused all help, insisting she was fine. She believed love would heal everything, but she didn't know how to love in a healthy way. She always sought a strong, patient man to save her from herself, but then she would destroy everything with her own hands because of the immense fear of abandonment deep within her heart. You're not the first man Claire has done this to, Nathan. She has hurt many people and hurt herself, but she can't stop. Ms. Elizabeth's story was another punch to my heart. I felt pain, not just for Claire, but for all children who have to endure such a horrific childhood. I understood that Claire's actions weren't intentionally malicious, but a consequence of deep-seated trauma, a distorted self-defense mechanism. I felt sympathy for her, but at the same time, an obvious truth became clear: I couldn't be the one to heal her. I had tried, but my love wasn't a panacea for the deeply etched wounds from childhood and complex psychological disorders. I couldn't be responsible for Claire's internal battle. She needed professional help that I, as a lover, couldn't provide. This wasn't an escape, it was an abyss. My biggest secret wasn't that Claire was ill, but that I had allowed myself to be drawn into this self-destructive cycle for too long. I had reached my limit. I made the most difficult decision of my life. It wasn't an impulsive decision made in anger, but a profoundly painful, carefully considered choice, steeped in tears and reason. I loved Claire. That was the truth. My love for her never faded. It was still there, deep in my heart. I didn't leave in anger or resentment, because I knew she was also suffering in her own way. I chose to leave as gently as possible, but with absolute finality and no turning back. One early morning, while Claire was still fast asleep, perhaps dreaming of chaos, I quietly packed my bags, each item neatly folded, each memory tucked away in a hidden corner of my heart. I looked at our shared room, at her serene face as she slept, and my heart ached. I wanted to hold her tight, to say goodbye, but I knew it would only make everything harder. I left a handwritten letter on the nightstand, writing down everything I wanted to say, all the emotions I had suppressed for so long. I wrote that I loved her. I cherished the happy moments, the beautiful memories we shared. But I also wrote that I couldn't continue to be a shadow to her bottomless insecurity, couldn't continue to live in control and endless emotional storms. I wrote that she needed professional help, needed a healing journey that I, as her lover, couldn't accompany her on. I wished her peace and happiness, to find her own path. It was a goodbye full of love but also full of letting go, an unspoken farewell, contained within a few pages. I left the apartment, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. The click of the lock echoed in the silent space like a gunshot, ending a chapter in my life. I rented a small apartment near the school, starting a new life, a life I never imagined I would have to live. The room was empty, without Claire's familiar belongings, without her laughter, her voice, or her complaints. A terrifying silence enveloped me. The first few days were a real battle with myself. I thought Claire would call, would look for me, would get angry, would beg me to come back. I had braced myself for threatening or desperate calls and messages, but she didn't call. My phone remained eerily silent. 3 days later, when I had almost given up hope for a reaction, I received a short, concise message, just a few words from Claire's phone number. I wish I could love you the way you deserve. Just that one message. No apology, no blame, no anger, just a painful acceptance. A rare moment of self-awareness about her own condition. A moment when she looked directly at the truth. I knew that was the most genuine thing she had ever said to me, more genuine than any prior words of love or remorse. Perhaps, in that moment, she truly understood that my love had exceeded the limits she could reciprocate in a healthy way. Life afterward wasn't easy. I still remembered Claire, still remembered the happy moments, the radiant smiles, the sparkling eyes filled with love we once shared. The pain of loss lingered, a deep scar in my heart. I had to grapple with guilt, with questions like, did I do the right thing? Could I have done things differently? I still thought of her, not with resentment, but with a deep sadness and a touch of pity. I didn't know how she was doing, whether she was seeking help, but now, that pain has been replaced by peace, a peace I had longed for. I dedicated time to myself, to my work, to my friends and family, those I had inadvertently neglected for so long. I continued therapy, learning to heal my emotional wounds, learning to love myself completely, and setting healthy boundaries in relationships. I lost a relationship, but I found myself again, found my smile, found my optimism. I learned that sometimes, leaving is not weakness, but strength. It's the choice to live. Loving someone with a personality disorder is not a sin. Love is a wonderful thing, and sometimes, it leads us to unexpected places, to complex and challenging relationships. But staying to lose yourself, to be emotionally drained, to live in fear and control, that's when you must choose to stop. There are loves that don't lack emotion, don't lack intensity, don't lack sweet moments that feel like heaven, but they lack health. They lack balance. They lack a solid foundation to last sustainably. You cannot heal someone if they don't want to be healed, and you cannot sacrifice your entire life, your mental and physical health, to maintain a relationship that is destroying you from within, turning you into a shadow of yourself. This is my story, a cautionary tale for anyone trapped in toxic relationships, for anyone loving someone who cannot love back in a normal way. Listen to your inner voice. Be brave enough to face the truth, and choose yourself before it's too late. Everyone has a different situation, a different story, but the lesson of balance and self-love is something we all need to learn. If this story touched your heart, or if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Please hit like and share this story so others can also learn from it, so they don't have to experience the pain I went through. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next dramatic and meaningful stories I'll bring to you. Thank you for listening, and please cherish yourself. Cherish healthy relationships before it's too late. See you in the next videos. Goodbye.